So I'm going to go over kind of these four hacks, or five hacks, basically, in this whole element of knock and take action. And in this episode, I probably won't get to all four or five. I'm just going to go through a few, and then I'm going to do a part 2 on the next episode of the podcast. So just stay tuned, subscribe, and every week we launch a new episode. So if you're watching this on Facebook Live, go subscribe to our podcast, the DDD Podcast, and it's in SoundCloud or iTunes or Spotify or whatever you listen to podcasts in. It's probably there. So the first principle, the first hack, is everything you need lies behind the door. And when I'd take car groups, so when I was knocking a lot more, I'd drive a car group out to areas. So 4 or 5 of us would pack into a car, we'd drive an hour and a half away, and I'd drop them off in their neighborhoods. And when I'd drop them off, I'd say, hey, it's 2 o'clock, and I'd say, I'd pick you up at 9. Well, what happens a lot of times to the new reps that didn't really know my style of working is they would, call me at 6 o'clock, and they're like, hey, I need a water. And you're like, well, no, I'm not going to come drive 15 minutes away and pick you up, take you to a gas station, get you a drink, sit there and watch you drink it, and then drive you back, and then now I'm a glorified chauffeur. I'm not going to do that. And then they'd call me, and they're like, it's so hot. Like, can we take a break? And I'd be like, well, no. And then they'd call me like, hey, man, I really got to take a dump. Like, there's no way. Like, I'm going to poo my pants. And so then this one, I'd feel a little empathy, and I'd be like, man, you're stuck in a neighborhood, don't have a toilet. And this is when it hit me, and I go, wait. You have probably 500 toilets, 3 or 4 per home that you're knocking on. So within about, a mile radius of where you are, you're going to get 500 to 700 toilets. I think you could knock a door and just ask them if you could use the bathroom. They're like, that's embarrassing. Like, I would never do that. You're like, I mean, why do they have toilets? They're meant to be used, right? And I'd have to sell them on everything you need lies behind the door. You're hungry? Ask for a snack. You need water? Guess what? They got like a bunch of sinks with flowing water. It's endless. You can ask them to fill up your water bottle and get some water. It's hot. Well, guess where the air conditioning is? Inside. So maybe you should knock the door, ask to go inside and sell somebody, and you'd get out of the heat. It's raining. Oh, guess what? There's a door that you could... Everything you need lies behind the door, where most people, they're looking to avoid the door and find their external success or their external validation through going to the gas stations and avoiding and sitting in a park under a tree. And it's like, that's the obvious, like, oh, well, that makes sense. But I'm like, no, go through the door, not run away from the door. And once I could teach my people that everything they need really lies behind that door, their money lied behind the door. And that opportunity for breaking through their limiting belief and their success and their confidence lies behind that door. And Ed Milet, in a podcast he did, he said, the willingness to go through that door into a room that they think they may not be prepared for, the people that lose in life are average and are waiting for some level of preparation before they're willing to go knock and go through that door. So I did a podcast interviewing Ed Milet, and when he said that, I was just like, wow, like, he had knocked doors for 10 years. A lot of people never saw that. Like, they're like, they see this guy that's worth $500 million, and they're like, dude, people didn't see the difference between me and an average person is I'm willing to go through that door, not being prepared, not feeling good, feeling under the weather, whatever that looks like. Because it goes back to the whole imperfect actions much better than perfect inaction. And the real risk of doing nothing, by Dennis Waitley. And it's like, when David Goggins talks about this principle, he says, when I see a wall, I'm looking to go through it, around it, over it, a window. I don't think of, oh, there's a wall, we should turn around and go a different direction. It's like, I know I need to go through the wall, bust it, break it down, jump over it, do whatever it takes. So once you figure this principle that your success, your confidence, your change, your new you, it really lies behind the door. So you have to figure out how to knock it, go through it. The next principle is the law of reflection. And so often people come to me when I coach and they're like, well, if I only had more people, or if I only had more time, or if I only had more money, I would do some X. And the principle is those that make time have time, those that invest money get money, and those that act now get now. And in Door-to-Door Con this last year, I gave a talk on this, and my speech had everything to do with the boomerang effect. And I said, what you send out comes back, and it's kind of karma. It's kind of this what you project into the universe, and it's a reflection. So the law of reflection is those that make time have time, meaning those that say, I'm going to invest the time, I'm going to create time through proper delegation, automation, and really set some priorities straight. I'm going to get my time back. And it comes back to the principle my dad would always say is like, if it's important to you, you'll do it. And some people, sleep is way more important than getting up early and doing a morning routine. Some people Netflix is more important than getting paid and breaking through their success and their financial slump. And so they go home and they just play video games or whatever. That's important to them. So they play video games for a long time. And I go, that's great. Weed, alcohol. If you make time to go out with your friends and drink on the weekends, or whatever that is, it's like, that's important to you, you do it. And so really analyze, like, what are you making time for? And that's where your priorities lie. And then assess, okay, do I like the priorities that I subconsciously created for myself? Those that invest money get money. So it's like too often we get afraid to invest in coaching, to invest in training, to invest in education when it's like society says go to college and spend this much money on college. And then it's like, but nobody trained you on investing in you. You just did it because society said to do it, but you didn't even take it serious. So I dropped out of college so that I could invest in me. And I started spending 30 to 50 grand a year just on personal development. And that was what accelerated me to become who I am today. I pay for personal fitness and coaching and counseling and all sorts of events. And for me, I'm not afraid to invest in me because I know that the return is tenfold. My income's 5 times what it was 10 years ago. And so, when we say we need more money and to start investing, or it's like once I have X amount of dollars, I can then invest in me, that's a falsity that we should stop believing. And what ends up happening is when we create a need to have more money to invest, we'll start making more income because we need an excess amount of income to invest, and our activity goes up, our income goes up, and so our results will go up. And so it's not until we create that need to invest instead of the wish to invest is when we'll actually see that real growth and wealth. And then those that act now, get now. So it's kind of this whole concept of like doing, this is a good quote. Doing what you like is freedom. Liking what you do is happiness. And Aaron Wagner, a buddy of mine, always says, when I can't tell the difference between when I'm working and playing, that's when I know that I made it. And too often we say, well, one day when I'm rich, I'll golf every day. One day when I have money, I'll start a business. One day when I have more time, I'll put more time into my relationships. One day when it becomes this habitual one day instead of living today. And too often we're preparing to live for after this life. You're like, well, I'm just doing the right thing so after I die that I'll go to heaven. And I'm like, okay, start living today before death instead of after death. Or one day I'll be able to travel and be able to live and be able to, once I have. And I'm like, dude, you are enough. You can today. And I went to Dubai with my buddy Doug in April. And it was 2 days later, I was on a flight. I wasn't planning on going to Dubai. He calls me, he's like, yeah, I'm going to Dubai tomorrow. I was like, well, can I come? And I went. And it was one of those moments in my life where I was just like, cool, I sent it. I'm living. I'm awake. I'm alive. And I just did a podcast with him, and it was so cool to reminisce on that because it was like, so often we're like, one day I want to go this place instead of those that act now, get now. And we forget to give ourselves permission to take and live instead of let our money just stack up in cash piles. And a lot of times we do that. I've been guilty of that. I'm cheap. Like I hate spending money. And I like to invest. I like to see it grow. But, there was a good podcast I did with, it was actually with Ed Milet. I was like, hey, when do you know to take off the chips and spend it on you versus keep investing? And I got to a point in life where I was like, man, I'm not living. Like I'm living for one day when I have retirement. And I'm just like, I can do that and live today. So I'm gonna kind of wrap up with this and just keep this one a short one because I wanna leave a teaser for the next sections, which you have. And then the last piece of this is decide. A consideration is an internal thought that prohibits you from taking action. Coach Burt. And don't just consider yourself consider yourself through life. It's like, I considered this and I considered this and I considered this and I considered that. Coaching a lot of people and doing a lot of the training and speaking, I've come to the realization that so many people are passive. They're passive aggressive. It's like, I maybe want this. It's like, you maybe want this. You either want it or you don't want it. And then I was like, oh, do you want it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So instead of considering you want it, do you just want to choose to do it? And they're like, yeah. And then I'm like, okay, so we're going to do it? Yeah. So when are you going to do it? Next week. I'm like, why not? Why not now? And they're like, I'm like, pull out your phone. And I just say, do it. Like, it's so interesting how once we get real clarity around what we want instead of what we consider we want, how much more freedom that gives us. And we become trapped in this insecurity of, I can't take action, I can't do, I can't have, I'm not enough, it's not time. And I'm like, wow, start driving your life today. And for those that are out there knocking, getting their face kicked in, for those that are out there in business trying to scale and not seeing the results that they're getting, a lot of times it's just because you're getting in your own way and you're procrastinating action, you're procrastinating investing, you're procrastinating the activity required, which is knocking. And when I think of knocking, it's, right now I'm calling on a lot of vendors and I'm like, guys, you call, you do this. And one day we'll get some vendors for Door-to-Door Con in January. And I'm like, it's in 6 months. We got to go. It's less than 6 months. And I was like, we got to get our vendors. And I keep procrastinating. I'm like, that's door knocking. Like, I got to get 70 vendors to this massive event that I hope you guys all make it to. And January 13th through the 15th, we got some really cool speakers coming up. Tickets are pre-registered right now because we're going to sell this one out fast. Last year we sold it out. This year we're capping it at 1,000. We'll sell that out again. But for us, it's like, I can't stress enough how many times I don't like doing the hard, scary thing because I have to pick up the phone. I have to make freaking phone calls, and I'd way rather go golf today. I'd way rather sit in my emails and figure out to-dos or make content or whatever that's more energetic than sitting there trying to call vendors. And I can even see it today where I'm just like, I need to act. That's how I get paid. That's how this event happens. This is how it all comes together. And I'm like, I will pick up the phone and start making calls today. And just like you guys out there in the field, it's like you so often it's like, oh, if I could just sell an apartment complex or if I could just land one big deal, I wouldn't have to knock as much. And it's like, it's the opportunity, the success is right behind the doors. Just go knock and make that decision instead of consider knocking, make the decision to knock today.